Andrew Fatato and Dave Haller began their careers working at ad agencies around New York City before starting their own in 2019. That agency, Major, has a single ethos: the boring will not be forgiven. Everything they create is governed by this principle, and they recently distilled all they know about having ideas that make money into a book called Handbook for Hacks. To really put their money where their mouth is, in addition to working for other brands like American Express, Coca-Cola, Verizon, Samsung, Smirnoff, and TripAdvisor, they made their own brand called Drugs for Plants, an organic fertilizer designed to give your plants their fix. We'll talk about all this and more, and we're going to have a good time doing it. All right, guys. Well, thank you for coming. We'll just get right into it. We have a lot to talk about, and I'm really excited to do it. So, Major, what's the deal? How'd you guys get started? And more importantly, why?
Big question. I mean, I don't know that we can get into why today because that's too deep, I think.
Yeah, that one. But we can start with when.
On the surface, yeah. We started working together about 8 years ago. We were partners at an ad agency in New York, working on Wild Turkey together. Had a lot of fun, drinking some whiskey, making some social content.
Yeah, to be honest, we were really making the social content to the point where we were concepting, shooting, editing. It was a scrappy budget, great team, but we really got in the weeds on making content for the brand. And that kind of sparked a thought that, hey, maybe we're a little more capable than we thought.
Yeah.
Naively or not, to just assume that you can start an agency after one social account. But then we had an opportunity to do a Japanese shochu brand, from the name to the branding to the bottle design. And then they asked if we could shoot a campaign in Japan. And we were like,
yeah.
We'll find a way.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We shot Wild Turkey content. We could shoot a campaign in Japan, surely.
Yeah. Which led to smuggling a huge drone into the country that we're not supposed to take out of the U.S., subsequently crashing that drone in the Japanese countryside, and bringing it back, getting our deposit back. It all worked out. The footage looks great.
It looks so good.
Did the feed go, did you guys have a remote recording device?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why drones are like, oh, you lost it, but you get the shot. But you just got it.
It was like heart stopping. It just the feed went blank. It went behind a mountain, and we were like, "That's it, we're done."
Yeah.
We're gonna get found out. We're gonna get sued by this company, and then
$40,000 drone.
and then it whizzed back around, and we were fine. But yeah, that was our first kind of project, our first foray, and we were still, I had been freelancing on the side. He had been working at a marketing startup, and so we had always done little side projects like that, but that was a big one, and that kind of was the impetus to, form Major and get a little more serious.
Yeah, 5 years ago. It's been 5 years this month.
Yeah, 2019 March.
Yeah.
Longest 5 years of my life.
Feels like 100.
It's pretty wild. It's been that long, but it's been fun for the most part.
Yeah.
So what was was it that job in Japan, or what was the initial impetus for you guys to say, we can do this on our own?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things. I think that we had kind of lived in that big agency system for so long, and we kind of understood what actually went into making real creative work that was effective and interesting, and we're like, what, I think that this doesn't need to be as expensive as it is for what you get on the other side of it. And so we really felt like there's an opportunity here to create kind of high caliber work, the kind of work that we've been creating for global brands at our big agency jobs, with a little bit of more of a nimble business model, building teams of people that we love that are really good at the specific brief at hand, instead of having a big building full of people that are kind of generalists and, maybe they know a little bit about whiskey or maybe they know a little bit about cars, but they're just kind of learning on the fly. It just seemed like a better, nimbler model. And it's been fun to kind of take that thinking and, we've been working on stuff for American Express and Showtime and Barilla and really bringing that nimbleness to, big brands, big campaigns, and seeing them, I think the industry is also changing a bit where there's less patience on the client side for spending a ton of money on these things when they know that it's just layers and layers of markup and needing to build into your margins, all of this overhead that ultimately is not value that's passed on to the actual client. So we just felt like we've have this experience making, high caliber campaign work. So like, what can we do to bring that to clients in a nimbler way, and also like just a way that is more fun for everyone involved, and more interesting also, ultimately, right? We have an ethos, we have a principle, right?
Yeah, we do. It's the boring will not be forgiven. Started as like our headline, but then it really became our filter for how we kick off a project. What is something that's never been done, but something that ultimately isn't boring? There's a lot of clutter, a lot of trash out there. Nobody wants to be bombarded by something that they're going to forget or ignore. So that's our caliber. It's the first thing we do when we kick off a project. Last thing we do before a project goes out the door, because things can get muddled between client revisions, rounds of feedback, and so that's our bar at the end of the day. And it's simple, the boring will not be forgiven. There's a lot of boring work out there, and we just don't want to add to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you guys are saying that buyers or clients are a little bit apprehensive for like the bloat of an agency.
Yes.
So what are you, like, if you had to pick your pitch for someone to not go with, say, a McCann of the world with you guys, what would it be? Would it be like more nimble approach, something more bespoke?
Yeah, I think it's really that big agency thinking without the overhead. And I think that is just crucial. We're able to compete conceptually with the big agencies. I think to Andrew's earlier point, that's really what set us apart, is that we can out concept or concept of the same level as a big agency. And then our freelance network allows us to scale up and down for the client project at hand. And I think a lot of the big shops, you have a retained team, you have a big overhead, you're kind of hiding costs behind different projects. And for us, it's like, hey, we can scale up the right size, the right people to make your campaign come to life. And I think clients are resonating with that because they don't ultimately, they want the best work for their brand. And a lot of clients have told us they don't care where it comes from, and they're open to taking a chance on breakthrough work. And so for us, if we can come to them with an idea that really gets them excited, that usually starts the conversation.
That's cool. So I might be fishing here a little bit. And tell me if this is not true for you guys. I'm just trying to follow up. So because maybe you already answered this in your last question by saying you guys can scale up or down. Are you looking to have, like, do you want less clients? You can be more bespoke with each one or more hands-on, or is your guys' approach like, because of our freelance network, we can take as much on as you'll let us?
It's a great question. I mean, I think one of the other things that we think a lot about, even in that ethos of the boring will not be forgiven, I think the reality is there are plenty of clients who want boring work. And I think that there's a little bit of a self-selecting factor in the kind of work that we do, the kind of work that we kind of put out into the world. We've gotten to the point now, nicely so, where people kind of come to us using our work as reference for like what they want to do with their brand. And that's helpful because then, we don't end up pitching a client who doesn't want to be interesting for their own reasons. We can unpack that or not, but, for us, it's like we want to work on stuff that is actually entertaining, actually memorable, actually something that people like paying attention to and remembering and making a decision off of. And that helps too. Like, growth has never been our number one goal. Our number one goal is to make work that we're proud of, that's effective because of its creativity, and do it with people that we like. And, too often growth causes some of those things to kind of go by the wayside. We're not looking to make 1,000 assets that are mediocre for a big brand. We're looking to make a few breakthrough things for brands that are interested in doing that and appreciate kind of the efficacy of that creativity. Because at the end of the day, I mean, what we've found even in our own work is that when you make something truly creative, it does perform way better against benchmarks because it's stuff people actually want to look at, which is not most ads. It's not most work out there.
So I think this is a nice segue into your book Hacks and sort of your founding principle with boredom will not be forgiven. So I read Hacks. It was a great read. It was a fast read, and I'm not just selling that. It really was, and I think it was for two reasons. One, because you guys have a great layout and it's broken down really well, but also I was just learning a ton. And talk to me a little bit about why you think creativity is the right approach for effective marketing versus just keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak.
100%. I mean, I think when we think about advertising or marketing in general. Like, this is an attention game, right? We need to get people's attention. We need to make memories, and ideally help people feel something different about the brand in a positive way. And when we're talking about attention and we're thinking about, just go back to caveman times, right? The things that are new are the things that could be eating you, right? And the things that you've seen before and didn't eat you, probably safe. And so there's just baked into that principle, that fundamental idea that if I don't show you something new, then you're probably not going to pay attention to it. And like, creativity as a whole is the process of creating that new thing that's going to grab that attention, that's going to grab those eyeballs and be like, wait a minute, what is that? What's going on there? And so if we start from that first principle, it really kind of opens up this world of like, how can we make things that people haven't seen before just so they notice it? That's our first bar to clear, because if we just make stuff that is familiar, it gets boring so fast and it doesn't get remembered, and then it's not going to work. We have to be in people's brains for people to think of us when they want to buy something or.
So when, cause I think a lot of people have this boundary that, how have you ever heard people say, like, I'm not creative, or I'm not a creative person. Mm-hmm. One line I love in your book is like, everyone's a hack. Mm. Yeah. So what do you mean by that? Can you unpack that? And how could someone who maybe couldn't bring you guys on be creative?
Yeah, I mean, it's a universal way of looking at the world, creative work in general. It's coming from a place of humility that no one really has it figured out. I think we especially felt that way because we didn't go to traditional portfolio schools, and so we kind of fell into advertising accidentally. But we've also found most of the best creatives have also fallen into advertising in that sense. But I think to the point, it's really not having that ego around having it figured out. And deep down, everybody is always learning, always getting better. And everyone's ultimately a little bit of a hack. And so it's something we want to celebrate. It's definitely something that went from an imposter syndrome, almost like crippling in the beginning of our careers, to kind of more of our superpower, the way we've incorporated it into our ethos. But I think it's a valuable perspective to have as a creative, or if someone doesn't feel like they're a creative, to understand that creatives felt just like you in the beginning of their career and still feel like that. So
100%. I mean, we talk with, we teach a lot, young creatives, and without fail, once a semester, one or two of them will come to us on the side and just be like, I just don't think I'm naturally a creative person. I just don't think this is like natural to me, or like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. Because it happens so regularly, we knew that it's like, no, like, creativity is not a function of innate talent. That helps, 100%. Some people have a little bit more of it than others. But at the end of the day, creativity is a willingness to do the work, put in the time, to find that new idea. Because we all have kind of the first ideas. I think if you're going to take on the identity of creative, or just decide to be creative in your work, whatever it is, it's deciding to make a decision to kind of push past that first thought and find the untilled ground. And that's something that everybody can do. And that's a lot of the reason that we wrote this book, not to like prescribe how someone is creative, but help them get from that blank page to the first step, and take away the fear of like, I don't know where to start. Because once you get started, once you start playing around with some of the methods and that we've written about, or other methods that are out there, this is not the only ways to do it. You start to realize, you know what, I do have this in me. Our brains, everyone's brains are fantastic synthesis machines, right? They take what's existing and combine it in new ways. And that's creativity. It's beautiful. Everyone can do it. And the worst thing that can happen is someone to believe that it's not innately in them, because everyone can. And that's why we wanted to write this book, to demystify it a little bit.
We often say, like, this is the book we wish we had when we first started out, because we were so, at least for me, so discouraged by, I don't get this. I don't understand this industry, the concept and execution. I just got lost in the sauce. And there were many times where I almost walked away from advertising because it's like, oh, I'm not cut out for this. And to your point, it's like getting past that initial hump, that valley of despair, if you will, whether it is your career in the beginning or also a project, this, like, the feeling that you can't crack it, is universal, but it's also something that can spark the best work.
So I think a lot of people, a hiccup that they have is like, I thought it was creative, but it's not working. Maybe we can take it then, like, and talk about your guys' benefits ladder and what makes an effective campaign.
Absolutely.
For sure. I mean, just to be clear, we don't want to take 100% credit for the benefit ladder. It is for sure a principle that is talked about a lot in the marketing world. But at the same time, I think it can be helpful when you're marketing things it's the instinct, right, to talk about the functional benefits of a product or service, right? What does this actually do? The car gets me from point A to point B. And we think about that as sort of the bottom of the benefit ladder. But where you really grab people is when you evoke an emotion, right? You make them feel something, or you appeal to a feeling that they want to feel. And we know that all products are going to make us feel something one way or the other. And so as we think about moving from that functional benefit of a car getting us from point A to point B to that emotional benefit of the thrill of the ultimate driving machine, or off-road vehicle, or just getting your kids home from soccer practice, there's a range of these feelings that you're chasing. And if we can start to market things with that emotional benefit, it's going to be much easier to appeal to what actually makes people buy things, because at the end of the day, we're not super logical. We want to do things that feel good, and we're chasing these feelings, and so that's why it becomes easier to get people's attention when you appeal to those emotions versus just kind of the facts, right? The commodities.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that, it not only is it more effective, but it also separates you from the competition as well. Because at the end of the day, in a competitive or in a landscape of categories of the same category, two cars do the same thing, but if you feel one way about one vehicle versus another, you're going to have a different reaction. Samsung and Apple ads are very much the emotional benefit of a product, of a feature. Samsung seems to be a little more functional, as it talks about, removing someone from a photo. And so you can already see just from that comparison how the emotional benefits always seem to outweigh the functional.
Yeah, so you guys have a great quote where it's, and I'm sure I think you said in the book you repurposed it, but maybe you didn't. It's people buy holes, not drills, right?
Yes.
So it's like, I think for the audience that might be a little confused, function versus emotion. I think what you're saying is, I don't want to say a bad ad, but maybe a poor ad or an ad that could be better will list the functions of something and why it's good, where a great ad would skip that, and it's like, the function of this will allow you to XYZ, right? Like if this drill gets you your holes quicker, you'll save time and therefore live a more enjoyable life. Versus like, wow, it's got 16 different sizes, but that doesn't register. So can you kind of talk about like just clear the air for like function versus emotion benefit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a couple different things that we're talking about here. Like on one hand, you have the function of a product, right? What does it actually do? And then you have the benefit of the product, which is like the effect of that thing that it does. So when you're talking about people buy holes, not drill bits, they don't, the drill bit is irrelevant if it doesn't make a hole, right? They're buying it for the result of what they're buying, not the
right.
physical
It's irrelevant. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And so you can think about this benefit ladder as like pure features, right? Like a stainless steel drill bit. You can talk about the functional benefits, which would be like it makes a hole. You can talk about the emotional benefit, and it makes you handy. And like maybe your dad would be proud of you if you could see what you did with that drill. Who's to say?
Right.
And that's going to be a way more emotional, compelling ad, right? Maybe not the best way to sell drills, depending on who you're talking to. Yeah. But I think the other thing...
I would maybe at least watch that ad.
Right, maybe. We'd remember it.
Remember
You're filled with shame. Yeah. But I think the other thing we also think a lot about, which I think is important, because I don't want to like oversimplify, right? When we think about marketing, there's also this idea of a funnel, right? Like we have this awareness stage of marketing where it's just about attention and memory. It's like I didn't know that this drill bit company existed, and getting to that point is so emotional, so much about attention, so much about that caveman philosophy of I need to show you something new to get your eyeballs on it. But as we go down the funnel, as we start to get into stages like people are considering, do I buy this drill bit or that drill bit, then we do get more functional. We do talk about those features. So we're not saying that you never talk about those things. There are different stages of that journey, that buying journey, but usually it starts with I need to know this exists to ever buy it. Then I need to know why is it better than the competition, and then I need to feel like I need it right now. I'm gonna buy it. And so like going through that journey, you start really emotional, and by the end it does get very rational. And it's just really knowing where are you at in the funnel, where are you meeting your customer, so that you can give them the right kind of message at that time. And that's really, it's all about dialing it in.
Right, because one ad can't do it all. I mean, it
Right.
can do a lot, but to Andrew's point, depending on where you are in that funnel, you might need to dial it up. But ultimately, it should feel holistic. It should still feel like this is part of the same message, same concept.
One thing I liked when I had never heard of the term funnel, but I'm a little newer to the space in that regard, and I thought it was interesting that like sort of what the image I remember is like like the product itself has to have all these other things figured out, and then you advertise. So like, can you kind of describe the funnel, and then for someone who maybe isn't thinking in that regard, like maybe some tips on like what a buyer or a client should have in order before they approach marketing?
100%. I mean, well, the real classical definition of marketing, they talk about the 4 Ps: price, product, placement, and promotion. And so, like, promotion is the advertising part of it, right? It's when I'm trying to get my message out there with a megaphone. But pricing is just as important. Am I setting the right price for this product relative to what people are willing to pay, relative to how much it costs me to make it? That's a whole other science that is very fundamental. Like, if this drill bit is too expensive, you're never going to buy it. It doesn't matter how emotional or functional these benefits are. You got the price wrong. If the other thing is the product, making sure that the product is designed for the consumer that is, that they're targeting to buy it. It's like really doing the research to understand who wants these things, what do they care about, and really making sure that drill bit does the job for them that they're looking for it to do. And then you talk about placement, which is often referred to as like the distribution channel. Is it where people go to buy these things? You have the best drill bit in the world, but if you have no website and you're not in Home Depot, how are people ever going to buy it? So all those other things matter, right? And they can be a part of classical marketing. Sometimes they're other people's jobs. But often, a common, misstep that clients can make is they try to solve a product problem with a promotion solution. They try to advertise their way to the price being justified. And sometimes the gap is too far. Advertising can only do so much. People don't trust advertising. They're not convinced by it. The best it can do is make a memory in your mind so that you can, when you're thinking about drill bits, you're like, oh, what was that? Oh, yeah, that brand. Okay, I'm going to check that out. That's pretty much as far as it can go. Maybe it can shift some emotional association, but if you're trying to convince someone that your drill bit made out of putty is going to do better than the drill bit made out of steel with an ad, you got a product problem that an ad can't solve.
Yeah.
And I basically just want to ask that question to make your guys' jobs easier moving forward. Taking a step forward, actually. So I like this quote that you guys had. I believe it was, all concepts are ideas, but not all ideas are concepts. And I thought this was really interesting because I often find like people think they have value because they come up with a bunch of ideas. And then I think it's like, well, like not only is execution more difficult, but like, is your idea effective? And I think until I read this book, what my innate reaction to that was, it's not a concept, but I didn't have the vernacular yet. So can you just kind of unpack what that means? Why not all ideas are concepts?
No, a concept at the highest level has ideas that live underneath it. It's a statement that a bunch of executions can fall out of, whereas ideas can tend to just be at that lower level and might not be able to overarch or spark further ideas. So one way to go back to the example we talked about with the car, a fast car allows you to get the most out of life. It gets the thrill of the time you have left on life. So there's something funny about a concept that we always joke about, that it allows you to escape the Grim Reaper in a sense. So that would be a concept. And then from there, you could create different executions on how you could bring that concept to life. So social ads could be, is it executions where you're drag racing the Grim Reaper? Is there executions where you give the Grim Reaper a pink slip because he doesn't have he can't catch anybody with these cars? What was our other one?
Social content about what the Grim Reaper does with all his time.
He's retirement.
He's in retirement.
He's got no souls to catch. Or even just the Grim Reaper in your rearview mirror for a print ad. So that kind of hopefully gets to unlock that a little bit. But I know in the beginning, often the easiest way I could figure out if something was an idea or a concept was, could I create other executions? Could I create more ideas out of this, or is this limited to just a print ad or just a social post?
Yeah, a great concept spouts many ideas,
Yes.
and it just keeps coming. That's how it's one of the signs that you have a good concept. It's like, oh yeah, I can make stuff off this for months because it's such a rich connective tissue to all these different tactics and executions and other thoughts.
That's cool. I never thought about it being a benchmark. Like if your concept creates a ton of ideas. I don't know if that's in the book actually. So I'm glad you said it. I'm glad you said it here. Yeah, maybe it was. Maybe it was second edition. Right? Yeah, it's true. Okay, so you guys go through a big part of the book covers a lot of different ways you can be creative and to come up with these ideas that hopefully in turn become concepts. I'm just going to list a few, the 6 main ones just for time's sake. So I believe it was give chaos a chance, make it a metaphor, exaggerate everything, shift your perspective, defy expectations, and collaborate.
Yeah.
If you had to like pick one, because we probably don't have time to go through all of them, but do you feel like is one in particular misunderstood the most, or is there like do you guys use one more than the others?
Yeah, I mean, I think oftentimes what we run into when people kind of try to get to that conceptual level but don't quite make it is, we talk a lot about how too often ads just kind of report the news. They just kind of tell you the facts about the thing that they're selling you. And so when we're, working with people in the early days when they're trying to kind of push past that initial sort of tactical thought and get to a conceptual level, the first thing we tend to teach is that how can you change that feature or function or problem into a metaphor? Because I think a metaphor tends to be the thing that we're the most used to thinking about and playing with. So like, how can I take this feeling or this function and turn it into a new way of expressing this familiar truth is something that we talk a lot about. So metaphor tends to be the place that we start. It feels like the place that people are most familiar with thinking in metaphors. And so often, it's every day when we're talking with students, it's like, all right, what's the twist? How are we going to convey this truth in a new way?
Yeah, the metaphor also, from the consumer's point of view, this is not our phrasing, but lateral thinking allows you to connect to unlikely things. And having you as a consumer have that payoff in your head when you're able to connect, it makes you remember the ad more. It makes you feel like you figured it out. And so that twist is really important because how many times are you bombarded with things that are just telling you facts and you don't remember anything it said? But if you helped connect it in your head, it's going to go a long way in making you remember it.
Yeah, hearing you say that, it kind of reminds me of like literature versus, I guess almost like fast fiction. It's like literature, you read it once, you don't necessarily understand everything, but then as you unpack it, you get like a little more reward from it because you're like, oh, I understand this because I did hit me over the face and I had to do a little of my own homework. Yeah.
The subtext.
The subtext, right?
Arts,
like when writing dialogue, it's like there's always something else that they're saying when they're saying it. Yeah. Oh, so you've recently started applying this not just to advertising, but to an entire business model. And I think you have it here. It's a fertilizer brand.
We sure do.
We sure do.
Drugs for plants.
Drugs for plants.
All organic plant fertilizer. I think obviously we love working with...
Andrew, let's get through this camera right here. Yeah.
Comes in 2 formulations,
2
28
sizes.
gram and 1 gram baggies. Simply tear, mix with 4 cups of water.
Did we take the joke too far? Maybe.
Probably. No, I think honestly, we love working with clients. We love working with brands. And I think we just wanted to apply our thinking to something that we were really passionate about. And I mean, we've loved plants for a while. I feel like during the pandemic, everybody really got a ton of houseplants. A lot of people killed a lot of houseplants. And so it kind of sparked this idea, us included, that maybe we could apply our thinking to a brand that we're actually really passionate about as well, but to really craft that story from brand level to conceptual campaign and apply this thinking to our own product. So,
But even beyond that, like how do we even go beyond marketing into actually solving more of a problem? I think what we found when we were thinking about the plant care space, and even as we experienced, right? You can love plants. You get to this like critical mass of plants where you're like, I love plants. I'm gonna buy another plant, and then you just keep killing those plants. And you got to break through that like moment of like, okay, I'm going to become a more conscientious plant parent. I'm going to start to get into actually caring for my plants. I'm going to stop Googling how many times do I water this snake plant, and I'm going to start to understand what does it mean for a plant to need water, right? Like that's a fundamental shift, and we went through that shift.
Yeah.
We went through that kind of metamorphosis from like plant murderers to like plant
parents.
Yeah.
Wow, you just said
Parents who don't kill their
you
kids.
said at the same time.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
I also there's like I'm just kidding. There's almost like a funny joke in there where you're wasting, you're like recycle, like you don't want to reduce the use of plants. You know what I mean? Because they're thrown away because they're killing them so much, so you can keep plants alive.
Plant massacre.
Yeah, it needs to end.
It needs to end. And so we're like, all right, well, we have all this experience kind of thinking creatively about selling things, but if we could like think creatively about solving this, plant parenthood problem, right? Like taking the casual plant person into a little bit more of an intentional plant person, because, both because I think you want to keep your plants alive, but also once you start to care about your plants, you start to see how it's all connected. You start to care a little bit more about the environment. It helps to kind of give you this touch point into your effect on the world around you. And it's actually a pretty influential shift in perspective. And so we're like, okay, how do we make becoming conscientious plant parents easier, more fun, more enticing? We have this big incumbent in the category, rhymes with schmerical schmo, and it's like not organic, it's bad for the environment. We're like, all right, we need to create something that actually gets people excited about caring for their plants, maybe have a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah. And to be honest, that's really how we started the thinking behind every little touch point, from the name to the color of the packaging to the ethos of the brand is plants are people. That's how we kind of position them. And I think to Andrew's point, making a product that is not only just a funny name, funny branding, but it actually has serious benefits. And so we worked with a team in Canada. They've been doing it for 20 years. Horticulturalists formulated this really awesome organic house plant blend that, to your earlier point, is not synthetic, doesn't cause runoff, doesn't burn roots, and is better for plants and the environment. But the other thing too is this is all biodegradable packaging as well. And so we really, when we started this, we're like, we're going to start something not just to start a brand, but something we're passionate about, solving a real problem that's out there and delivering a product that's actually better for everybody. So that's our ambition, and I don't know, it's been pretty good so far.
Yeah. I mean, through the whole chain, we're trying to do it better. And I think the other thing we thought a lot about was like we wanted to make a well-balanced fertilizer, which is what we have here. But we also worked with our horticultural team to add a bunch of micronutrients that help the plant parent who is still not quite good at it yet. Help the plant be a little bit more resilient to a bad plant parent. So we added a bunch of extra nutrients that helps in case you miss a watering or maybe the light's not so good. And we really just want to make it super easy to care for your plants. So we're kind of on this mission, right, to make plant care easier, to make fertilizer better for the environment, which shouldn't even be a thing we have to say, and actually make plant care fun. And we've been having fun. So
we sure have.
Well, I love the ads, like to your point about the plants being humans and them whispering in the corner and giving them a voice, asking, and even the Christmas one you guys did a couple years ago, where it was like because we all celebrate Christmas and taking down trees, and it's like, well, plants have a say in this too, giving them a human voice.
You slaughter Christmas trees as well.
30 million Christmas trees.
Yeah.
It really started with
was it in the massacre? Or
the plant massacre.
The plant massacre.
It needs to end. Someone needs to do something about it. But honestly, we pulled that off really quickly, but it came from a really fun idea, but also the fact that there is a lot of waste with these Christmas trees. And then living in New York, you see them on the curbs for like months after the holiday. But we pulled that protest off at Rockefeller Tree. We organized a group of like-minded individuals who protested for about
Definitely didn't pay a single protester. Definitely all organic protest.
Was all grassroots.
Did people join thinking it was a real protest when you guys filmed it?
They did.
Because it was a real
protest. It was.
Because
Right.
people were gathered with signs
Right.
that we made. Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't seen it and are listening, it was a I don't know, you guys probably describe it better than I can, but it was a an ad that you guys made and you put on a fake but well-intentioned protest in the massacre of Christmas trees right around Christmas time in what was it, Times Square?
In the shadow of the Rockefeller, the largest
tree.
martyr of them all, the Rockefeller Christmas tree.
The largest martyr of
Yep.
them all.
His
Let
death.
his death be the last.
Let his death be the last. Or, yeah.
So good. So I think often organizations don't realize when they're working in the B2B space or internal communications, they don't see maybe a need for creativity. Can you sort of justify for those people that are like, well, no one outside the organization is going to see this, or it's just B2B, why they should still take everything they're about to make and have a creative focus on it?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think we think a lot about, especially with internal communications, employer branding, B2B messaging. It's like there's so many objectives, so many messaging points that, you know, every stakeholder wants to get their bullet point into the content. And those objectives are important, right? Like that is the purpose of the work. We got to get that stuff in there. But at the end of the day, if no one pays attention to it or no one notices it or no one remembers it, then it doesn't matter if you got every bullet point in there. And so when we think about applying creativity, you're always marketing to people. You're talking to human beings. It doesn't matter if it's your employee or a consumer or another business. At the end of the day, you're talking to people and you want to get their attention, make a memory, and creativity is fundamental to that because it's the only way that content is going to work, actually achieve the objective that you set out to do when you've made the content in the first place.
Yeah. I'd also add to that as a creative, it's kind of your responsibility to push yourself to remember someone is going to see this at some point, and it's on you to either push it to the next level or make it actually something that is effective or different, even if it is maybe an email copy or an email header. It doesn't matter. Someone's going to see it, and if you want it to work, you got to make it, push it a bit.
And one thing I love that you guys mentioned hacks was you said have an opinion.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times creatives or even people that are just in charge of execution, they tend to just put that I guess expertise on maybe the client or the buyer, and that. But I like that what you guys said is like, no, that's what you're getting paid to do. Don't be afraid. And also, I think on the from the client and buyer's perspective, they also should probably be more open to listening to that, or hopefully, they can expect that from us.
Also, as a client, wouldn't you want your creative agency to be pushing you? Like, if you are just agreeing with everything the client says too, it's a red flag for them as well. So you have that responsibility to push them.
Yeah, I think it's at the end of the day, so much of the value that you're bringing into that situation is that outside perspective. It's a different point of view, and I think the good clients, the smart clients, are the ones who are like, you know what, I'm in it. I'm in the sauce. You know, I'm so inundated with all the details of my organization and the culture and everything that's wrapped up in this project and the stakeholders that I'm trying to please. It's a breath of fresh air. It's helpful to have that outside perspective. It's a bonus, if anything. And so if you're being brought into that situation, that is what you can bring to it from a value point of view, and you can actually give a different point of view. That's valuable. And the client can listen to it. They can take it and they be like, you know what? Thank you. I know more about this than you do because I'm living in it, and that's fine. But the worst thing you could do is go into that situation without an opinion, because then it's like, what are they really paying you for? Just to push the buttons? That's not how you're going to build a relationship that's going to kind of add value to everyone and continue to kind of be a business or achieve the objective that everyone is trying to achieve.
I think also what organizations tend to forget is that not everybody knows about your either product or what you do or your values, and where an outside source can help you with that and help you kind of gut check where you guys are at. Do you guys have any experience doing that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy. It's like as soon as you are inside the organization, you are no longer the actual audience for whatever you're making, because you already know too much. Like you're already too inundated. You already care more than anyone would ever care about.
That's a great point.
You know, and so I think that's why it's so helpful to kind of have someone help you reset that perspective, because your perspective is tainted. No matter how hard you do the due diligence to try to think like someone else, it's helpful to have someone outside, right? The old adage, right? You can't read the label from inside the bottle. It's like that's what we can help bring to the process.
That reality check that some clients need more than others.
So for people that would love to pick up hacks, where can they go, and where should they go?
Yeah, absolutely. You can get a copy of Hacks at schoolforhacks.com. Schoolforhacks.com. We also teach classes on schoolforax.com.
We teach copywriting, art direction, as well as concepting 101.
Yeah.
And if I had a plant in need of some drugs, where do I go to pick up some drugs from?
Boy, do we have the place for you. Drugsforplants.com. Give your plants their fix.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming. I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has also learned a lot. And keep it up. And I'm going to keep being a fan.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. This was great.
Yeah. Super fun.
Cool. Thanks, guys.